Today's video is going to be about the recent trip that I just took with EF Ultimate Break to Egypt. It was Egypt Cruise the Nile. That's the exact name of the trip that you can find on their website. So I will be going over this entire trip in detail, including places that we stayed, things that we ate, that we did. I will be also going over the entire itinerary day by day, giving you an overview of the trip so you know what to expect before you book and before you go. I also have a discount code to share with you guys if you are planning on taking a trip with EF anytime in the future, so stick till the end of this video. So the trip schedule is for 10 days. You get to visit 4 cities, so Cairo, Giza, Luxor, and Aswan, all in Egypt. In terms of the trip category, it is labeled as a plus trip. EF Ultimate Break has 3 categories that they usually label their trips, which are backpacker, standard, and plus. On this specific trip, like I said, you are traveling in between cities in Egypt. You do get to go on a Nile River cruise, which is such a highlight on this trip. You also get to visit a lot of the major landmarks that you can find in Egypt, like the pyramids, the Sphinx, multiple temples. I think we went on maybe like 5 temples. So let's get into the itinerary for this trip. Like I mentioned before, it is one of the most jam-packed itineraries that EF offers and one of their tours, but it is so incredible because you do get to see a lot of stuff in such a short amount of time. And also, like, when in Egypt, who knows when you're ever gonna get to go back there, so you might as well just see as much as you can. Day 1 was an overnight flight to Cairo. So I left out of Boston and flew with Turkish Airlines. There's no guarantee that this is the airline that you're gonna fly with. It all depends on which local airport you fly out of. There's a couple people that went on this trip that came from the West Coast, and I think some of them flew like United or American, so it can vary depending on which airport you're coming out of, but EF will usually never have you flying with like Spirit or Southwest. So my flight from Boston was about 9 hours, and it was an overnight flight. Thankfully, the seats were very comfortable. I slept through like majority of it. Yeah, I can fall asleep anywhere. Everyone hates me because I can just sit on a plane and sleep through the entire ride. Then I had a layover in Istanbul. It wasn't that long of a layover. It was about 3 hours, and I absolutely loved the Istanbul airport. If you've never been to that airport before, you don't know what you're missing. It is like a shopping mall in airport mode. It's awesome. 2 of the girls that came on this trip that were also at that airport, so we just chatted up on WhatsApp and decided to meet at the airport because we were all on the same flight from Istanbul to Cairo together. So that was awesome too, that I got to meet some of the girls before getting there. I also got to have a little lunch break, and I love Turkish food. Turkish food is bomb. I got to sit down at a coffee shop, and I had like my little like Turkish coffee and my baklava. So I was a happy camper. The layover was just enough time for us to kind of just like unwind from that really long flight before going to Cairo. The flight from Istanbul to Cairo was about an hour and a half. It was super quick. Arriving in Cairo, one of the biggest questions that I know my group had before going was the whole visa situation, because if you're coming from America, you need a visa to get into Egypt. We were asking about this a lot before going because there is an option to do it online, or you can just do it while you get there. So our representative was already at the airport waiting for us with our visas in hand. We literally just grabbed the sticker, put it onto our passport, and went through the immigration line. They asked us what we were there for. We said tourism, breezed right through the immigration line. Also keep in mind that if you do want to exchange your money from US dollar to Egyptian pound, the airport is a great place to do it. So right next to baggage claim, there is currency exchange. There's a bank. So I recommend you doing it there because you know you're gonna get the best value for your money versus, you know, possibly getting scammed out on the street. So from the airport, we took a van to the first hotel that we stayed in, which was the Steinberger pyramids in Cairo. As soon as we got there, our tour director, Haysam, was already waiting for us. I think we were the last group to come in. Oh no, that's a lie. I think there was somebody else who came in after us. Yeah, but it was pretty late on that day. I think we got there around like 9 p.m. Honestly, we got stuck in a lot of traffic. You guys, Cairo traffic is no joke. Like, I'm from Boston, and traffic can get pretty bad here sometimes, and I've been to Los Angeles where they say the traffic is horrible, and I agree. But none of it compares to Cairo traffic. It's just utter chaos, and it's super unpredictable. You never know how long it's gonna last. So the ride from the airport to the hotel was about 45 minutes, and by the time we got there, everybody had already had dinner, so there was dinner waiting for us in our room. This hotel was pretty nice. We were each rooming with one other person, so we had a lot of space in it. The highlight of this place was the view. So let's move on to day 2. Technically, this is your first full day in Cairo, but on the itinerary, it's labeled as day 2. So this day started off with a bang. We, right off the bat, went straight to the pyramids of Giza. And it's so big. Like, from the photos, you can't really see, like, the size of the pyramids until you're like standing right there. You soon find out as I go through this itinerary that there are a lot of early days on this trip. So we got up early in the morning. It was about 6 a.m. and the first thing that we did was go outside to our room's balcony to see the view of the pyramids from our hotel, which was absolutely amazing. So we couldn't pass up the opportunity to take a couple pictures and just look at how they came out, so it was totally worth it. Ran downstairs, had a quick breakfast, and then headed straight to the pyramids. So as soon as we got there, we got a little history lesson and an overview about the pyramids. Some conspiracy theories were dropped here and there, and we talked about that throughout the trip. For the majority of the sites and the landmarks that we saw on this trip, our tour director was also our tour guide. That man is so knowledgeable about Egyptian history, and he literally knows everything. The man is like a walking encyclopedia. So after Haysam gave us a spiel about the pyramids, some of us opted to go inside. I was one of the ones who raised their hand. There's not much to see inside of it besides what they think was King Khufu's burial chamber, but the pathways to get up to that point are very narrow, and the deeper inside that you go, the tighter it gets and the muggier it gets because there's no air ventilation at all inside the pyramid. So it gets hot, it's muggy. So if you have any health concerns, you can't do tight spaces, you can't handle the heat, this one is not for you. Just go ahead and skip it. Also though, for the people who opted not to go, they ended up getting some really cool pictures outside of the pyramids. So after I saw their pictures, I was kind of really sad that I missed out on it, because by the time that we got out of the pyramid, we didn't have a lot of time to get our own photos. So choose wisely if you are planning on going on this trip. If one of the things that you're looking forward to for visiting Egypt or going on this trip is riding camels, this was the opportunity that you're going to be given. You do not have to do this at all, only if you want to. I went with 4 of the other girls who decided to do camel rides. It was pretty bumpy, but it was a lot of fun. We got some awesome photos with the camels. The people who did stay behind also got a chance to take pictures with the camels. They didn't necessarily want to ride them, but they did get photos with them. So if you do want to get photos with the camels but you don't want to ride them, don't worry, you will have the opportunity to do that as well. After the camel ride, we made a pit stop for refreshments and bathroom breaks, and then we headed over to the Sphinx. At this point in the day, I think it was already around noon. The Sphinx visit was super duper quick. We basically went in, got, a history lesson about the Sphinx, and then they gave us like 15 to 20 minutes to get our photos, which was super quick. I do wish that we had more time with the Sphinx at that point, because there were so many different angles that we just wanted to photograph at the specific location. We ended up going back to the Sphinx on the last day of the trip, but we'll talk more about that later. After that, we did a quick stop for lunch. Let me just say that the food in Egypt was nothing but amazing. If you're traveling to a foreign country for the first time, or if this is just a spot that the culture is just so different from yours, don't be afraid to try the food, because it was one of the highlights of this trip. For lunch, we had a plate of meat, rice, and vegetables, which is pretty common in a lot of the places that you're gonna go in Egypt. Most of the restaurants serve like family-style meals, which was pretty awesome. After lunch, we went to go visit the Saqqara Pyramid, which is cool, but not as cool as the pyramids of Giza, obviously. Then we went back to the hotel to go rest, shower, get ready for our welcome dinner. This first full day in Cairo was extremely packed. We did a lot. Everything was super fun, but it was also a little bit tiring because we had all been traveling the day before. And then later in the evening, we had our welcome dinner at the Andrea El Mariotea. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I'm definitely butchering it. Just the Andrea restaurant in New Giza. It was beautiful. The food was great. So it is outdoor seating. So the entire place is has drapes over it, but it's not completely covered. So one thing that I do recommend is that you bring a jacket, because in Cairo during the day it will be really hot, but then it can get cold at night. So for your welcome dinner, make sure you dress warm, because if you do go to the same restaurant as we did, you are going to be cold at night because you're going to be in an open air space. All right, day 3. Day 3 was an early day. Yeah. Got a 3 a.m. wake up call on this day. It's too early, people. We're heading to the airport right now. It's almost 3 a.m. It was brutal. By 6 a.m. we were already on a plane to Aswan. It was about an hour-and-a-half flight. So it was a quick flight. It wasn't too bad, honestly. We all kind of woke up. It was fine. We hopped into our trusty bus and headed to our hotel in Aswan. So here we stayed at the Basma Hotel in Aswan, and let me tell you, it was beautiful. It was one of the prettiest hotels that we stayed in this entire trip. The Wi-Fi, awesome. The view from the hotel, awesome. There was a pool. Everything was just awesome, and the fact that the Wi-Fi was working was a plus. Since our first day when we arrived in Cairo, we started having a lot of Wi-Fi issues, and that was like a reoccurring thing. I'll talk more about it later towards the end of the video when I go over tips and things that you should know before going on this trip and before traveling to Egypt. So we got to the Basma Hotel at about 8 a.m. and our rooms were not ready yet because we couldn't check in until later, but we had been traveling all day, and before we headed out of the hotel, we kind of really wanted to just like have a place to like change and brush our hair and fix our faces and put on deodorant. And yeah, people at the hotel were just so nice to us. They arranged a temporary room that we could have to kind of like freshen up and go to the bathroom before we headed out on our day, and that was honestly the nicest thing ever, and it was much needed, so we appreciated it so much. So then we had a quick breakfast at the hotel and then headed out into Aswan. We got on a boat for the first time on this trip, the first of many. I think we spent like half the trip on a boat. I did not know how much time we were actually going to be spending on boats on this trip, and honestly, it was way more than I can count. If you have seasickness, bring Dramamine. Personally, I usually get motion sickness, and I've gotten sick on boats before, so I brought medicine because I thought I was gonna need it, and I ended up not needing it. So just be prepared and know that you're going to be getting on lots and lots of boats on the Egypt Cruise the Nile trip. Then we just cruised the Nile for a little bit. It was a very smooth ride. It was a beautiful day out. Aswan is much hotter than Cairo. Make sure you dress accordingly and bring either a hat or a scarf to kind of cover your head and your shoulders if you're planning on wearing like more revealing clothing, because it is very hot in Aswan. The sun is much stronger than in Cairo, and if you're like me and you have very thin hair, you will get a scalp burn. And then we docked at a Nubian Village. It was kind of this quaint, cute, colorful little spot. I believe that the spot that we stopped in was like a hotel. It was so beautiful. Me coming from an architecture background, I was just like, it's just so beautiful, it's colorful, it's different than anything that I had seen or that anybody on the boat had seen before. So we took some time to take pictures. After that, we went to a local's house in the Nubian Village, where our tour director gave us a little rundown, a little background history about Nubia, who they were, what their culture is like, and the family that hosted us, they had like a little like tray with bread and tea for us to try, like their traditional food, and it was just so nice and so amazing once he started talking about their culture, and he was like getting so deep. It's already like 5 o'clock and I've been shooting since 2. We're thriving. So after we had our snacks at the local family's house in the Nubian Village, we got back to Aswan, had lunch on a boat. Like I said, lots and lots of boats on this trip. Then we went back to the hotel. This was one of the... Then we went back to the hotel. This was one of the few days that we kind of had some like downtime in between activities. I probably should have slept, given that we were up at 3 a.m. that morning, but no, instead I decided to go and lay by the pool in the sun instead. Then we got ready for dinner and had dinner that night. And oh my god, EF outdid themselves with this dinner. The restaurant that we ate at was on an island in the Nile River, and in the background there was the view of the Philae Temple, just all lit up and beautiful. And we had like a candlelit dinner on this island, and it was the most magical thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. The minute that we like walked up to the restaurant and saw the entire table ready for us with all the beautiful lights, and then the background with the temple was just like, am I dreaming? Am I in a fairy tale? Like, what is this? And on top of that, the food was absolutely delicious. Unfortunately, somebody from our group did have a bit of an accident on our trip coming off the boat. So if you are going on this trip anytime soon or planning on going on this trip, make sure that you watch your step coming on and off these boats. So on day 4 of the Egypt Cruise the Nile itinerary, we had a later start, which was still 8:30 a.m. is what was considered a late start on this trip. At this point, we were still in Aswan. That morning on our to-do list was the Philae Temple, which was the first big temple that we visited on this trip. If you didn't already guess, yes, we got on another boat to get to the Philae Temple because it is located on an island, like the dinner that we had the night before. Like I mentioned before, Aswan is a lot hotter than Cairo, so usually the closer it gets to noon, the hotter it gets. So by the time we got to the Philae Temple, it was already like 10 a.m. and it was hot. We had a good amount of time there. We had our usual, hour of Haysam giving us information about the history of the temple, telling us awesome stories about ancient Egyptian culture. And then we did have some time after that to kind of wander around on our own and take as many photos as we wanted. So it's at this temple that I took a picture at Hadrian's Gate. I'm gonna put it right over here for you guys to see. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen this photo before, but if you don't, go ahead and hit that follow button because that's usually when I post all my photos. And if you want to keep track of all the trips that I take with EF in real time, that's probably the best place to look because that's when I post the most current content. After the Philae Temple, we had a quick pit stop at a frankincense store, which was honestly really cool. I had no idea what frankincense was before I went on this trip, but a lot of people were super excited about this. When we went in, they had an expert glassblower showcase how he made like the very intricate little like perfume bottles that they sold at the store. Then we went upstairs and they kind of did like a showcase of their frankincense and aromatherapy oils, which was pretty cool. You can buy the frankincense and the oils that they offer at this specific location, but it was just a little bit too expensive, so I ended up getting just one little jar. After the frankincense store, it was time to check into our Nile River cruise, which we got on in Aswan. The Nile River cruise is a big part of this specific trip just because you're cruising on the Nile for like 2 or 3 days out of the full 10 days of this trip. We were pretty excited about getting on the boat. So the way that the boats are all organized and docked as soon as you get into one is like they're all aligned directly behind each other. So you have to cross through like a couple of different boats before you get to your own boat. So that's something to watch out for if you are going on this trip. If you do decide to get off at any stops on your own without the tour director, make sure you're getting on the right boat when you come back. After checking into our rooms, we had some time to rest in between that and our next activity, which was a Felucca sunset boat ride. What a Felucca is, it's basically just a traditional Mediterranean sailboat, and it looks like this. What's it like going on a Felucca boat ride? It's honestly awesome. I thought it was gonna be way bumpier than it was, but the ride was super smooth. There was actually no seats on this boat that we went on. It was just like a big flat like cushion mat, and we all sort of just like sat on it, laid on it. It was a very chill vibe this entire experience, and I was super surprised. So the goal was to capture the sunset on this boat, but Mother Nature had other plans. It wasn't very windy when we were on the boat, and we were on a sailboat. So at some point the boat stopped moving and nobody noticed. This was honestly one of the best days of the entire trip just because we all had some downtime to spend with each other, with the group. And we started playing games. We played 2 Truths and a Lie. We started chit-chatting. We were just talking. And the next thing we knew, it was dark and we were stranded in the middle of the Nile. Nobody noticed until our boat started to like drift towards like a moat of grass, and we started getting bitten by bugs hardcore, and that's when we noticed that the boat wasn't moving. They had to call for backup. Somebody came on another boat to come and take us out and back onto the docks. It was one of the best times that I had on this trip. We just all got to spend time with each other and have fun, and that is one of the things that I love about going on these trips with the F. It's the people that you meet and the friends that you make. On day 5, we had a pretty early morning as well. We started our day with the Temple of Kamomo, which is a temple that's dedicated to 2 gods, Horus and Sobek. It's Sobek, guys. This temple visit was pretty chill and it was pretty quick. After it, we went to the crocodile museum that was right next to the temple, which was very short and small, but also super cool because they have mummified crocodiles. We were back on the cruise by 9 a.m. and that's when the boat left the docks and we started cruising very slowly on the Nile, which my motion sickness was very grateful for. And we pretty much had the rest of the day to ourselves. This was the only day on the entire trip that we had some extra downtime. So if you are planning on going on this trip, I highly recommend you take the day to kind of just relax. I just went back to my room, put on my bikini, went up to the deck, and laid out in the sun once again instead of sleeping. The boat did make a pit stop in Edfu before getting to Luxor. Some people did get off the boat and go exploring. I personally was so tired and I had a lot of content to edit, so I just chose to kind of stay in my room and chill for the rest of the day. Day 6 was a pretty awesome day. That's when we got to visit the Temple of Karnak, which is the biggest temple complex in Egypt, period. This is the spot where I took this photo. This place is called the Hippostyle Hall, the precinct of Amun-Re, and it has the biggest columns I've seen in any Egyptian temple that we visited during this entire trip. It is literally beautiful. If you've been dying to come to Egypt just to get a photo in one of these temples, this is the place to do it. Trust me. Karnak is just so big and giant, and in my opinion, it's way better than Luxor. We spent about 2 hours at Karnak. We had our usual hour educational tour overview of the site, and then we had an extra hour to kind of explore on our own and take our picture. Then we got on another boat to cross the river and go to the other side over to the west bank of Luxor. And that's where we had a pit stop at the Colossus of Memnon before going to the Hatshepsut Temple. Alright, let's shoot this before I fall asleep. So the Hatshepsut Temple was super at the top of my list, so I was extremely excited for this one. This temple is one of the coolest things that you can see while you're in Egypt, and I was amped when I saw that it was on our itinerary. By far, it was definitely one of the most crowded spots that we visited in all of Egypt, even more crowded than the pyramids, but nonetheless, it was still a pretty cool experience. We got there around 10 a.m. and the sun was extremely hot. So if you are going on this trip, make sure you're bringing sunscreen, a hat, or a scarf to cover your head and your shoulders, because you will be out in the sun all day and it will roast you. Then we went back to the boat for lunch, and around 5 p.m. we headed to the infamous Luxor temple. If you think you've never seen this temple before, odds are you probably have, because it's all over social media. Even though I think Karnak is way cooler than Luxor, it is still a pretty dope experience. We didn't spend as much time as I wish we had in the Luxor temple just because we got there pretty late. The temple closed around 8 p.m. and by the time we got there, it was already 5. We had about an hour of like guided tour, and then by the time that we were done with that part, we only had a few minutes to kind of get our pictures before the sun went down and it turned completely dark. After the Luxor temple closed, we kind of just walked around. There's an avenue of sphinxes that connects the Luxor temple and the Karnak temple. It's about like a mile and a half of a cobblestone road just lined with sphinxes next to it, and some of us decided that we wanted to walk from Luxor all the way to Karnak. So our tour director was like, okay, if you guys want to walk, we'll walk. And honestly, it was such a memorable part of the trip because it was just a small group of us and it was dark and we were just kind of like walking very slowly on this avenue of sphinxes. And honestly, at some point I kind of just like got silent and started to just like reminisce on everything we had done so far and how incredible of an experience it had been. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would be going to Egypt someday, let alone be walking in the middle of an Egyptian city at night surrounded by sphinxes. If you think day 6 was jam-packed, wait till you hear about day 7. This is the day that we got to go on the hot air balloon ride that was super poppin' on my Instagram feed. When you book this trip with EF, it is an optional excursion. Our whole group opted to do it because it was an incredible opportunity and I had never been on a hot air balloon ever in my life, not that I can remember. So doing a sunrise hot air balloon ride over the Egyptian desert, no-brainer. So if you decide to do this optional excursion, just be prepared that it is going to be a very early morning for you. I think we had our wake-up call at around like 4:30 a.m. but at this point we were already used to being up early anyway, so it was no big deal. The hot air balloon ride lasted for about an hour. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience, looking over the Nile River Valley and getting to see the desert and, you know, just having everybody from the trip in one spot and everybody was just having a great time. It was an unforgettable experience and I would 100% do it again if I have the chance to. Then around 9 a.m. we headed to the Valley of the Kings. This was another highlight of this trip, something that everyone was looking forward to doing, and it was literally one of the coolest things ever. So we each got an entry ticket. With an entry ticket to this specific attraction, you get to choose up to 3 tombs to visit, excluding King Tut's tomb. So if you didn't already know, King Tut's mummy is actually in the Valley of the Kings, where all the other mummies that were found around the valley are in a museum in Cairo. It is an extra charge to go visit King Tut's tomb. That ticket you have to buy separately, but since we were traveling with EF, all of our tomb visits for this trip are included. Also, a thing to keep in mind is that tour directors and tour guides are not allowed to go inside the tombs with you. So Haysam will usually give us a rundown of each tomb, whose it was, give us a little bit of background history on it, and then we would go inside, take our time exploring it, and then come back and head over to the next tomb. This day was really hot as well. Keep in mind, you're in the middle of the desert, so make sure that you're bringing water, that you're keeping your head covered, that you have your scarf with you if you don't want to bring a hat, and make sure to drink lots and lots of water. At the end of this video, I'll be going over the water situation. I know it's a big question that everybody usually has and asks if it's safe to drink the water. The short answer is no. But I honestly didn't have to worry about it the entire trip because EF took care of it. Like I said, this trip was very jam-packed, so right after the Valley of the Kings, we hopped on another plane from Luxor back to Cairo. It ended up being a much longer day than we were expecting it to be. Luxor to Cairo was about an hour and a half, and as soon as we landed back into Cairo, we got stuck in the worst traffic of all time. We were supposed to be at this incredible restaurant at the Marriott Mina House Hotel in Cairo for dinner around 7 p.m. I don't think we got there till like after 8:30, so it was a pretty late dinner. This is not the place that we stayed. We just went to go eat there. And the food was amazing. The restaurant manager came up to say hello to us and greet us and welcome us. It was a pretty awesome experience, even though we were so exhausted. Sorry about the noise. It was so nice to have just great food and great service, so much appreciated. 10 out of 10 on that hotel and that restaurant. The hotel that we did end up staying at when we got back to Cairo was the Hilton Pyramids Gulf, which was also an incredible hotel. We didn't get to check in till after 10:30 at night, so we were all pretty out of it at that point. But as soon as we walked into the hotel room, all of our worries were out the window because it was a massive hotel room. It's probably the biggest hotel room I have ever seen in my life. That place was bigger than my apartment. It was by far the biggest room that we had in the entire trip. So it was super nice to have our last hotel also be one of the best hotels that we stayed at. Let's wrap this up. Water break. Day 9, our last, or day 8, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. For day 9, we were back in Cairo first thing in the morning. We did a tour of Old Cairo and Coptic Cairo. Basically, we visited a lot of very old churches and mosques. We also went into the Cairo Citadel and visited 2 different mosques. I'm honestly not even going to try to pronounce the name of the first one. I'm just going to write it right here because I know that I'm totally going to butcher it. The second mosque that we got to see was the Great Mosque of Muhammad Ali, which was absolutely beautiful. Once again, the architect in me was freaking out. Contrary to popular belief, all us girls did not have to cover our heads when we went inside the mosque, which to me was such a shock. And that was always a belief that I had, that when you went inside an Islamic religious building, you had to cover up your head if you were a woman. And our tour director just basically looked at us and was like, that's not really a thing. So that was something new that we learned that you guys should probably know as well. You do have to take your shoes off before going inside the mosque out of respect for the people that are praying, but that was pretty much it. It was fun. After visiting the Citadel, we were getting pretty hungry and our tour director said, just wait, we picked the perfect spot for us to have lunch. And let me tell you, when this man said perfect, they meant perfect. The view from this restaurant was stunning. Stunning. You could see the Great Mosque that we had just been out from a distance, and you had like a whole cityscape of Cairo. The restaurant was in this park that had like a garden right outside of it, and the food was so good. They had like a huge like box grill of meat just in it, like steaming. And like I said, the way that they usually serve all the plates, they'll start with a couple of appetizers, which is usually like pita bread, and you'll have your like hummus and your dips, and then they'll start coming with like the family style plates, and they'll have rice and vegetables and meat. And it was just so much food, but it was so delicious. And then just adding the view from the restaurant, it was top notch, absolutely perfect. 10 out of 10 recommend. The food was incredible, but we ate super quickly because we were already running late, and we had about an hour and a half to get to the Cairo Museum, which was about to close pretty soon. Basically, we just barely made it. And it wasn't anyone's fault in particular. The Cairo traffic was just very awful on that day, and it pushed us back a little bit. And so the museum closed at 5 p.m. Last call for anybody coming in was at 4. I kid you not, it was like 3:59 and we had just all gotten through the door. We almost missed it by like a literal second. But since it closed at 5, we didn't have a lot of time in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which is where the mask, the golden mask of King Tut and all his treasures are located. So basically it was the quickest museum tour I have ever gotten in my life, but it was kind of fun because we were just like running from one spot, and Nason was like, so this is this, yada yada, and then we were going to another attraction. He was like, and this is this, da 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 da, and like literally just going through like bullet points super fast so we could like rush through everything important and then have time at the end to go through the exhibition where King Tut's treasures and his golden mask are. We had about 10 to 15 minutes to check out the exhibition, and then we're like right on the dot as we walked out of that exhibition, the museum was closing and they were kicking us out basically. But even though we didn't get much time at the museum, at least we got to see the golden mask of King Tut, which was a highlight of this trip. It was awesome. And then that night we had our farewell dinner because the next day we had 2 of our travelers that had to go home a day early, so they decided to have the farewell dinner a day before. And it was okay. I say the welcome dinner was definitely better in terms of the food. We ended up going to this very like modern high-end Lebanese place in Cairo, and it was okay. Like the place was great, but the food, there's just like, the food was good as well, but there was so much food, and they just kept bringing plates and bringing plates and bringing plates, and we were hungry, so we just started eating. And by like the first or second course of all of the appetizers that they brought, like we were already full and we couldn't keep on eating. We just felt so awful that we couldn't even finish the first course of the food. Overall, it was nice. It was super heartfelt. We had a couple people do, you know, some speeches, some thank yous, you know, say our goodbyes to the people who were leaving on that day. It was very emotional. And then we all went to bed after that because we were tired and full bellies and tired. Time for a nap. Day 10 was basically our last day in Cairo. Not everybody had a full day because we were all flying out at different times. It was technically a free day. Some people decided to go ATVing by the pyramids. Other people tried to go golfing. We decided that we wanted to go to the Civilization Museum in Cairo just because our tour director just hyped it up so much. And we were like, okay, we gotta go to this museum. So early in the morning, we went to the Civilization Museum, which is where all the mummies that were found in the Valley of the Kings are kept, which was kind of trippy and creepy at the same time, but overall super cool. How many times are you gonna say that you saw like ancient Egyptian mummies? So I was like, okay, let's do it. And they had some pretty cool mummies in there and a lot of other cool stuff in the museum. So if you do go to Cairo at some point, I highly recommend the Egyptian Civilization Museum. Go check it out. After that, me and two of the other girls went back to the Sphinx to get some photos because on the first time that we visited, we didn't get a lot of time for photography because it was like a quick in and out. So we went back to that spot to get some really cool shots and some footage of the Sphinx. And then we headed back to the hotel and pretty much just chilled for the rest of the day. And then before going to bed, our tour director took us to get some real Egyptian kosheri, which is a traditional Egyptian dish with pasta, lentils, rice, and then you get like marinara sauce to put in it and you mix it and you could put spices in it as well. And he said that we had to try the real thing because the food that they served at the hotels and the cruise was very bland for tourists. I was out to this place that was directly across from the hotel that we were staying at and it was absolutely delicious. So grateful that we got to have this last meal with our tour director because he was just absolutely amazing the entire trip and it honestly wouldn't have been the same without him. If you ask me for my review of this trip, I can honestly say 10 out of 10. Hands down, no questions asked. EF definitely outdid themselves on this Egypt trip. The amount of value that you get for your money is reason enough to choose this trip over a lot of other ones that they offer. So I highly recommend this trip. Before you book, I will leave you with a couple of tips and things you need to know before going on this trip. I'm just gonna be quick, just basically go over all these things in bullet points, and then later I'll make a more detailed video on travel tips and things you should know before traveling to Egypt. If you are going on this trip with EF, these are the things that you should know. Number one, wait to get your visa at the airport because an EF representative is gonna have it ready for you. Number two, be ready to be on the go. There is a lot of activity on this trip. It says online that it's like a moderate activity level, but I beg to differ because our itinerary was very jam-packed and we were tired. Even though we had a lot of fun, you don't get a lot of free time or downtime because the itinerary is so full. Number three, definitely bring an adapter that's also a converter for this trip. Egypt does not use the same voltage and plugs that we do. Make sure that your adapter is also a converter. Don't try to plug in any very powerful blow dryers in any of the sockets either. If you are worried about the hair tools, don't be. Every single hotel that we stayed at had a blow dryer in it. And for the water situation, I was so worried about this before going because everybody always said don't drink the water, don't drink the water, which it is a thing. Our tour director and EF themselves warned us not to drink the water, not to brush our teeth with the water, but honestly, I think it was just them being extra cautious so nobody got sick. Personally, I totally forgot one day and just like brushed my teeth with the water, and like when I shower sometimes, I tend to like open my mouth. I don't know if anybody else does that, but alright, I'm just weird. But nothing happened. I did bring a filtered water bottle. I have it actually right here with me. It's a filtered Brita, but it won't do anything for you because it's just supposed to filter out like harsh chemicals from the water, and what you should really be worried about is the foreign bacteria that your stomach isn't used to. But don't worry about any of that because EF is well prepared. They will be giving you bottled water 24/7 the entire time you're on your trip. The tour director will be on you at all times to drink water because you can get dehydrated if you don't. Also, make sure to bring bug spray on your trip. Like I mentioned, you will be on boats a lot, and especially when you're on the Nile at night, there are a lot of bugs and mosquitoes, and a lot of us did get bit. Even though we did bring bug spray on the day that we're on the boat, we forgot to bring it with us. Also, definitely don't forget sunscreen, a hat, and a headscarf. It will be super helpful for you, especially when you're out visiting the Valley of the Kings or the Hatshepsut Temple or any temple in the desert per se, because the sun does get pretty hot throughout the day, and if you have thin hair like me or fair skin like me, you'll most likely get burned, and that is also a recipe for dehydration, and you don't want to be sent home during a trip to Egypt. Last but certainly not least, don't be afraid to book this trip. So many of us were super skeptical before going because we had heard so many things about Egypt that just honestly turned out not to be true at all. Your safety and comfort during these trips is always a priority for EF, so they will always make sure that you feel safe and comfortable wherever you go. And honestly, I think my experience traveling to Egypt for the first time was so amazing because I went with a group of people, because I went with a travel company and had a tour director who spoke the language, who knew the area, who was basically there the entire time to like guide us through everything. Anyways, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you for sticking till the end. As I promised, I have a discount code for you guys if this is your first time ever booking a trip with EF. Use my code for $100 off your booking. And lastly, I will be posting more content about Egypt. I did vlog the entire trip. I will be posting those in series because it was a lot of ground to cover and a lot of footage. So eventually I will be posting those videos as well. So stay tuned if you're interested in watching those videos as well. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit that notification button if you want to get notified every time that I post a new video. And if you have any more questions about this specific trip, my experience, if there was anything that I didn't necessarily cover in this video or that you're still curious about, make sure to drop that question in the comments. I will do my best to get back to you. Thank you guys so much for watching, for sticking through this entire video. I know it was a lot to cover, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch it. Until next time.